Welcome to the Vol Bros. My name is Evan. This is my brother Rustin. We are two Vol Bros who are actually bros in real life. And my voice is better now. Thankfully, I'm very happy about that. It's been 2 weeks and I can finally talk again, all normally and everything. I've already got people joining us on the stream. We appreciate that. We are currently live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. If you're on Twitter, you're probably not seeing us because you probably already reached your 600, whatever the cap that was, 600 cap for today. That was somewhat frustrating. But
Still not resolved. Elon better get that figured out soon because
yeah,
it's awful.
absolutely. Mr. Jones is joining us. Welcome, Mr. Jones. We're glad you're here. He said, "Go Vols." Absolutely. So here's what we're going to do. You'll notice we used our football intro today because it is now football time. It is July 1st. So as of today, we can officially say SEC football returns next month because, well, I guess it qualifies. Vanderbilt is in the SEC and they do kick off next month against Hawaii. They host Hawaii in late August. So as of today, football returns next month. And we are 2 months away from the start of Tennessee football. So super excited. Mr. Jones said Tennessee athletics now accepting volunteers, especially with the big budget promos they got going right now. But what we're going to do today, because listen, we're just 2 weeks away from SEC Media Days now, and that's like really the official kickoff of the season ultimately. And so it's just right around the corner. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at this 2023 schedule for every SEC team and look at how that will impact the Vols postseason, you know, projections and where they could be. Could they be in the playoff? Will they be in the SEC championship game? If not, what kind of bowl would they be in? But then my favorite thing that we're going to do tonight is then we're going to look at, well, what would that mean for next year? When there's no longer any divisions, if this season were in 2024, how would that shake out? And would it make a difference on Tennessee if when everything's different next year? And so that's what I'm most excited about. We would really, really love it if you all would let us know as we're going through these, what your projections for each Tennessee or each SEC team is. Mike said, or Mr. Jones said, Mike Matthews is going to be a Vol. I think we're going to finish strong. Totally agree. 100% agree.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds like that trio of wide receivers. That kind of sounds like they're all coming. So that would be a tremendous wide receiver class, no doubt about it. People could argue maybe the best ever. So without further ado, here is the 2023 2023 SEC football schedule for every team. We're going to start and just go alphabetical order. Rustin, what do you see for Alabama this year?
So I love that we're doing this because I think there's some fascinating storylines embedded all throughout these schedules. I've got Alabama going 11-1. I think they lose to Tennessee but win out. There's a few interesting games on there. They have to go to Texas A&M, and Jimbo Fisher has always seemed to have something special for Nick Saban. So that could be an interesting one. But honestly, I think if you look at Alabama's schedule, it's not overly imposing. Their hardest games they all get at home. Bingo. I do think Tennessee has something that Nick Saban still has not figured out. It dates all the way back to Hugh Freeze. I just don't think Nick Saban has ever figured out how to attack somebody who doesn't give him a chance to adjust. And so I think Tennessee beats them, but I think they get LSU at home. I'm a little skeptical of Jaden Daniels in big games. So I think Nick Saban can probably dial up some things for him. But if you look at the rest of their schedule, there's not a whole lot of difficulty there. And so I think 11-1 with a loss to Tennessee.
So Rustin says 11-1 overall, 7-1 in the SEC. My prediction, I think this is a revenge year for Alabama because if you'll recall in the national championship game last year, David Pollock mentioned to Nick Saban on national television to his face that Georgia has taken over college football. And I think he's going to use that as fuel all season long. I also have them going 11-1, but I have them going 8-0 in the SEC. I think they're going to have one loss to Texas near the beginning of the year. If we all remember last year, they just barely snuck by Texas at Texas. And if Quinn Ewers hadn't gotten hurt, Texas probably would have won that game. Well, this year it's early in the season, so there still could be some quarterback, unsettledness going on there. And I think Texas is going to sneak up and beat them. And then Nick Saban is going to use that as fuel for the rest of the season, and they will not lose again the rest of the season. I think that Tennessee coming in after losing this year to Tennessee at Neyland, I think Bama just like we got South Carolina circled on our calendar, I think they got that one circled. So I have Alabama going 11-1, but 8-0 in the SEC. Mr. Jones agreed with you, Rustin. He said Heupel is the Saban slayer. Mr. Jones said they're going 0-12.
Fair and balanced.
I like it. Yeah, I like that. Zach said, I believe Bama's going 10-2 with losses to Tennessee and Ole Miss. I think that's actually legit. That could happen. That could totally happen. And Zach said he's watching us and Jaws. That's what I'm talking about. And I love it. I appreciate it, man. Well, I agree, Mr. Jones. He said Tennessee has Bama circle on our calendar. I totally agree with you. Absolutely. Now, it's interesting what you mentioned, though, before we move on, Rustin, about Alabama. For Tennessee fans, we love even-numbered years in the calendar because on like 2022, 2020, well, not 2020, but 2018, 2016, because those years we get Alabama and Florida at home. On odd number years, we have to go to Alabama and Florida, and we get Georgia at home. So I was wondering, as I look through Alabama's schedule here, look at all of their games that are at home. They get Texas at home, Ole Miss at home, Mississippi State at home, Arkansas at home, Tennessee at home, LSU at home. Like they get all these difficult games, apart from, they actually have to go to Mississippi State. So their home games are Texas, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Tennessee, and LSU. The most difficult opponents on their schedule are all at home, with the exception of Texas A&M. That is an extremely favorable schedule. Extremely favorable. So I just got to wondering. I was like, you know what? I wonder how that's played out in the past. Alabama's won 6 national championships under Nick Saban. 4 of them have been in odd number years: 2009, 2011, 2015, and 2017. So no wonder that has been the case, because they get all of those teams at home during those years. And I think this is going to set up really well for them again this year. Mr. Jones said, even on Saturday, Sunday, it don't matter. Vols by 50. I love it. That's right. Absolutely. So I think, that might explain some success that Alabama's had on odd number years. I think they look forward to odd number years just like Tennessee looks forward to even number years. Now, sadly, this is the last year that we're ever going to be able to say that, because, next year everything changes. So I hope, if Alabama fans are watching this, for y'all's sake, I hope you take advantage of this season, because next year is going to be much different. Their schedule is way more difficult next year. All right. Yep. Arkansas, what do you got for Arkansas, Rustin?
So I have Arkansas going 9-3 overall. I think there's a few interesting dynamics in this schedule. I think they easily start off 3-0, then they go into Baton Rouge and lose, go 3-1. I think they beat Texas A&M. I think that Sam Pittman is not on the hot seat, but with the wrong kind of year could get there. And I think he realizes that he needs to win this game in Arlington. And so I think they go 4-1 there, and then they beat Ole Miss to get to 5-1. then lose to Alabama to get to 5-2, and then beat Mississippi State, beat Florida, beat Florida International, beat Missouri. So that would put them at 9-2. Every year, Hugh Freeze, for his entire career, has had a game that he pulls off a stunning upset. And I think that their third loss is going to be Auburn in November. I think Hugh Freeze will have put everything together by then. I think the way the schedule lays out, they're going to be coming off a tough game in Gainesville, probably be a little beat up. It's the end of the season. And I would not be surprised at all if Hugh Freeze comes in and does some things to surprise them and pulls off the upset. If he doesn't, I'm still sticking with 9-3 because of the Texas A&M game. So either way, I think they're 9-3. I think they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and what is that?
5-3 in the SEC.
Yeah, 5-3 in the conference. So 9-3 overall, 5-3 in the conference. Again, I think they lose against LSU and Alabama, and then either Texas A&M or Auburn. I think they split those games. If they lose both and they finish 8-4, I think we're going to start hearing some rumblings out of Fayetteville. But
I agree with that totally.
But I think Sam Pittman knows that and knows he needs to get that 9th win.
Well, and I think this is also one of the reasons why there's a lot of expectations on Arkansas is as you look at the SEC West, what team has the most stable position at quarterback? I mean, you can make the case of LSU, but really it's Arkansas. Having I see that, Doug. I'll get to that in a second. Only having KJ Jefferson at quarterback, man, that's a huge advantage for Arkansas. So I have Arkansas going 9-3 with losses at LSU, at Ole Miss, and at Alabama. I think those are going to be their 3 losses.
And
they'll go 5-3 in the conference.
If they lose at Ole Miss too, let's say they lose to A&M, Ole Miss, and Auburn. Whew, I don't think Sam Pittman's in Fayetteville anymore.
Well, and to their advantage, they get Texas A&M and Auburn at home. The 3 games I mentioned are all away games, but that would be 9-3, 5-3 in the SEC. Zach said he thinks Arkansas goes 7-5 this year. And I mean, that could happen. Absolutely, that could happen. Let's see. Mr. Jones said NIL is even the playing field and has exposed Saban's coaching or lack thereof. Now, NIL is definitely even the playing field. Saban's like one of the greatest coaches of all time. But, I mean, certainly has even the playing field.
Sure.
Zach made a great point. He said Alabama and Georgia have no more cupcake schedules after this year. That's exactly right. I mean, like that. A whole different dynamic after this year. I love Doug's comment. So Doug is a big Georgia fan. He said only game that matters is in Knoxville on November 18th. I totally agree, Doug. And Doug knows that's by far Georgia's most difficult game on their schedule. He knows that. He said winner of that game wins the SEC and is number 1 seed for the playoff. That is a totally possible scenario. That is a very possible scenario. And Zach said, Doug, Tennessee's going to Hotlanta. So that's interesting because I have Tennessee going to Atlanta. Rustin does not. But then the question is, which one is actually an easier path to the playoff? It's a bizarre how that works, but we'll get to that in a minute. Auburn. Who you got for Auburn, Rustin?
I think it's going to be a typical Hugh Freeze kind of season. He's starting off with a brand new group of guys. He's been raiding
a lot of work to do.
Yeah, he's been raiding the transfer portal, rebuilding a roster to fit his style of play. I've got him going 6-6. and I think there's a bunch of coin toss games in there. I could see them going as well as 7-5 and as bad as 4-8. It really just depends on how the ball bounces on a few of these games. At 6-6, I've got him at 0-1, 0-2, 0-3, 2-4. I've got him at either 2-6 or 3-5 in the conference. Most likely 2-6.
That's what I got.
But I think the Cal game early in the season is interesting.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what he does with that one. If they lose that game, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to get to 6-6 without pulling off
Yes,
a
it
couple
is.
of upsets. But I like Hugh Freeze as a coach. I think he will pull out all the stops and do as many creative things as he can to try to help his guys win. And so I think there could be an upset in here somewhere. He's always been known for that. He always seems to pull off one game a year that everybody's like, how in the world did they do that? So I've got him at 6-6. Few good bounces, maybe 7-5. Few bad bounces, maybe as bad as 4-8. But I think he's good for 6-6.
So I have him at 6-6 and 2-6 in the SEC as well. As you look at their schedule, that Cal game is very interesting because if they win that, now listen, Sanford ain't no slouch. I mean, that could be like a somewhat close at halftime, like what's going on. And then they win and pull away in the second half. But they're gonna be 3-0 potentially by the time they go to Texas A&M. And you can already hear all the college game day and all. Is Auburn back? Is Hugh Freeze doing a miracle in the first year? And then reality is going to set in because those poor dudes have to go. Let's look at this stretch right here. They have to go to Texas A&M, home against Georgia, to LSU, home against Ole Miss, finally get a somewhat of a reprieve, home against Mississippi State, and then at Vanderbilt. But then they got to go to Arkansas, and then home against New Mexico State, and then they end with Alabama. I mean, after week 3, that schedule gets way tougher. And so I have them at 6-6, 2-6 in the SEC, with losses at Texas A&M, against Georgia, at LSU, Ole Miss at home, at Arkansas, and Bama at home. I have those games as losses. Zach agrees. He said he thinks 6-6 is good. Zach said just 63 more days till kickoff. That's exactly right. Very excited about that. It's so close. Let's see. Scott. Hey, welcome, Scott. We appreciate you, buddy. He said, love your show. Longtime fan listener. Hey, man, we appreciate that very, very much. Thank you so much.
That
You're
Cal
welcome
game.
to join us anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. That Cal game, I think Auburn fans could potentially overlook that. I don't think they realize Cal's actually pretty good. And
it's always tricky going across the country.
Right. And their head coach is Justin Wilcox, who is a defensive genius. So they will be prepared for pretty much anything Hugh Freeze can pull out of his bag. That has significant problem written on it for Auburn.
Zach said he'd laugh his butt off if Auburn beats Georgia. I think the whole country would, but I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I'd love it to happen because that helps Tennessee, but I just don't think it's going to. It is interesting they're playing Georgia so early in the year this year. I found that very interesting. All right, so that means we both have Florida, or both got Auburn there. So let's move on to Florida. Okay, this is a public service announcement to any Florida fan who might be watching this right now. You may want to turn it off at this point because you're not going to like what either one of us have to say about Florida's 2023 outlook. Do you want to go first? You want me to?
Well, I mean, it's pretty abysmal. I've got them at 3-9. I think the only teams on this schedule they can beat are McNeese State, Charlotte, and Vanderbilt. Which would also put them at 1-7 in the conference. I'm not a fan of Billy Napier. I think he is Butch Jones 2.0. I he hasn't been investing in the portal at all. They have major issues internally with NIL. It's amazing how many guys they have commit and then never sign. Like it's just there is so many internal issues in that place right now, and they get to open with Utah, who
I
might
know it.
be a dark horse Final Four contender. So they're going to walk out there and just get obliterated in game
Exactly.
one,
At Utah.
right? And it's gonna, in my opinion, it's gonna set the tone for the whole year. All the problems that exist there, all the internal issues they're dealing with, they're all just gonna explode when they get beat by 40 by Utah, and it's gonna be a really bad year for Billy Napier.
Well, and as I looked at this schedule, it really, really became clear that I don't think Billy Napier is going to be at Florida after 2024, because this schedule is a very difficult schedule this year. And next year, they have potentially the most difficult football schedule in the history of college football. No exaggeration, like no exaggeration. And I mean, my goodness, I've, poor Billy Napier. He's got no chance, man. I mean, like it's a rough deal, man. Because when you look at this, like Rustin said, they're going to go. I have the exact same prediction that Rustin did on this. We did not confer, by the way, before this. We both did this individually, but I mean, when you look at their schedule, they're going to lose at Utah. I mean, let's be honest. Utah should have beat them last year at home. I mean, like that was an incredibly close game. Utah very well should have won that game. So they're going to lose at Utah. They're going to beat McNeese. Tennessee's going to beat them. They're going to beat Charlotte. So they'll be sitting at 2-2. They have to go to Kentucky. That's not good for them. They're going to lose at Kentucky. Then they get Vanderbilt at home, which is good for them because they're going to have an SEC game they can win. So by week 6, they're going to be 3-3. They will have lost to the teams they should have lost to and beaten the teams they should have beaten. And people are going to be like, well, maybe, I guess maybe. And oh boy, things take a very dark turn for them from that point forward. Because they have to go to South Carolina. South Carolina still has Spencer Rattler. They're not going to win that game. They play Georgia and Jacksonville. They're not winning that game. They get to host Arkansas. Arkansas is going to beat them. They have to go to LSU. No chance they win that. Then they get maybe a chance against Missouri, but they have to go to Missouri in late November. Exactly.
It'll be sleeting and it'll be -10.
Yep. So that's not going to work. So they're going to lose that game, and then they have to play Florida State, which they're not going to be Florida State. So they're going to go 3-9 and 1-7 in the conference.
Not only do they have to go to Missouri, look at the rest of the SEC schedule that day. They're going to be the 7:00 game on ESPN because Tennessee, Georgia is going to be the 3:30 game. So not only do they have to go to Missouri at the end of November when it's just going to be miserable weather, they're going to have to play at night.
Yeah, that's right. Either on ESPN or SEC Network, probably SEC Network. You're exactly right. It will be a night game because that Kentucky South Carolina game is probably going to be the 7:00 ESPN game. And so then you got Florida, Missouri on SEC Network in primetime. You're exactly right.
And everybody else are playing mid-majors, so they'll all be, SEC Network Plus, noon game, that stuff.
Yeah, I don't think the Alabama UTC game is going to be a prime-timer.
Probably not going to garner a whole lot of attention. So, they're going to have to play probably the 7:00 game on SEC Network in Como.
Mr. Jones said Florida. I like it. Now we're cooking. He's bringing the dad jokes now. That's what I live for on these, Mr. Jones. I appreciate that. That's what I'm talking about. Zach said 2-10. Yeah, very well could be
possible.
I mean, they might not beat Charlotte
last year.
Yeah, that's true. Vandy beat them last year. That's exactly right. But I mean, they might not beat Charlotte. I mean, like that's that's going to be. It's not going to be a good season in Gainesville. That's for sure. Mr. Jones said 0-12, and if possible, somehow 0-13. Yeah, Zach said Vandy's a toss-up. I mean, that's right. They are.
They are.
The good news for Florida is that they get to host them in the Swamp this year. Man, that is a weird statement. We just said the good news for Florida is that they get to host Vanderbilt in the Swamp. My, how times, as Michael Scott would say, how the turntables. Mr. Jones said they just had a quarterback flip away from him again. Yeah, that's right. They did.
After the
Billy
Jaden Rashada
Napier.
mess and all the stuff that came out of that, I don't understand why anyone would trust anything Florida says for a very long time. And it's still like that's not done. He could still come back and sue at some point. It's just a mess.
Zach said, remind me, is a 3:30 game still on CBS? So it is for one more season. I messed that up during football season last year. I thought last year was the last season, but it's not. They actually have one more season, and then 2024 it'll be on ABC. So
unless the ESPN can't pay their bills, in which case CBS might get it back.
That's exactly right. Thoughts go out to all the people that lost their jobs yesterday from ESPN. That was a lot of people.
That
and
was
a lot of high profile people too. I mean, that was rough to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I feel sorry for David Pollock. He's an awesome guy. I mean, he's just a great guy. And, I think it caught him by surprise as well. Speaking of David Pollock, let's talk about Georgia. Rustin, you go ahead because yours be pretty quick.
So I subscribe to the age-old adage, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. And I think there's two things that play in Georgia's favor. Number one, they're just really, really good. They have a lot of depth. They've done a great job stockpiling talent. They've got a wealth of weapons at the running back position. They've got a couple of capable quarterbacks who will do a good job keeping them in games. Their defense speaks for itself, and their schedule is an absolute cupcake. So
Bingo.
I think November 18th is pretty much the only tough game on their entire schedule in Knoxville. But again, until you beat them, they're the man. And so I have them going 12-0. I have them winning the SEC championship. And I don't see anyone beating them. I think Tennessee has the by far greatest chance of beating them, but the rest of their schedule is an absolute joke.
That's a pretty fair assessment. So I have them going 11-1 and 7-1 in the SEC because this is the year, baby. I don't know, man. Sometimes you just get that feeling. You just get that feeling that it could be happening. And I think Tennessee pulls off the upset in Neyland in late November. My goodness, that place will be rocking that game. And just like Doug said, that game is going to be the determining factor of who goes to Atlanta. Like that is going to be the game. Years ago in the mid 90s and even in the early 2000s, Tennessee, Florida, that game was the deciding factor of who's going to Atlanta this year. Well, this year it is Tennessee, Georgia, and whoever, just like it was last year, and whoever wins that game, they'll be in Atlanta. And so I think this is it. I think this is the year. So I got Georgia going 11-1, 7-1 in the SEC. Let's see. Zach said he has them going 1-11 with the one win coming to Florida. Zach asked, even with Mike Bobo, you think they go 12-0 even with Mike Bobo?
I think he's got a lot to prove. I think he's got to show people that he's willing to be as open as the past has been. I will say this though, and I'll go back to what I said about a month ago. I don't want to beat Georgia. I want to be 11-1 because that's November 18th. if that game was still in early October, by all means, let's go beat them. But for some reason, my microphone stopped. I don't want to beat them November 18th. I want to play them well, play them tight, get to the next week and go wax Vanderbilt, and then get a week off and be the 11-1 team as the probably 3 seed and coast into the college football playoff because we did not have to play Alabama or LSU in an extra game. Even if you go 12-0, I'm not sure you want to play that extra game. There's nothing positive that can come out of that. It's, if you win it, great. You win a meaningless SEC championship. But if you lose it, you could lose your way right out of the playoffs. And we know how the committee feels about Tennessee. So I don't think we want to leave it in the committee's hands. I would much rather let Georgia go 12-0, even 13-0. Go wax Alabama or LSU in the SEC championship. That'd be wonderful. And we'll rest up and be fully healthy for the playoffs.
Doug said, I'm with Evan, 11-1 with a loss to Tennessee and a back door into the playoff. See, Doug knows. Like he's saying, if Georgia loses to Tennessee, then that puts Georgia in the playoff because they'll have one loss. They'll be the number 1 ranked team all season long.
Yep.
Like that's not going to change. They'll be number 1 all the way up until November 18th. And then depending on what happens that day, they'll either stay number 1 or if they lose to Tennessee, they'll drop to like 3 or 4. But they will be in the playoff no matter what. And so you got to be feeling good if you're a Georgia fan because you're going to be in the playoffs this year. Like that's the way it is. You're either going to run the table or you're going to lose one game and get in. The only scenario that could potentially prevent Georgia from getting into the playoff, the only scenario is because you got to look at common opponents in here too, because that's going to play a factor in this. The only scenario that might potentially kick them out is if Georgia loses, or before that, if Tennessee loses to Alabama and then Tennessee beats Georgia and then Alabama, no, let's flip that. If Tennessee beats Alabama and then Tennessee beats Georgia, and then Alabama beats Tennessee in the SEC championship game.
Mm-hmm.
If that were to happen, that could potentially knock Georgia out of the playoff. And so it'll be very interesting to see how that shakes out. It's going to be fascinating. It will be absolutely fascinating. Zach said if we beat Georgia, we're going to need another goalpost. I totally agree with that. Absolutely. Totally agree with that. Mr. Jones said, ESPN is losing credibility. No one watches them anymore since it's the age of social media and the bias reporting they do is fake. People want real. I'd say there's a part of that you see some bias and they're humans, and so they're going to show bias. Let's see.
Go to Zach's comment.
Zach said, I've never heard someone say I want to lose to Georgia. Sorry, Russ, not in my DNA. Don't think it's in J Hype or Bazooka Joe either. And I agree with that. They don't want to lose to Georgia.
Let me ask you, I don't want to lose to Georgia. I mean, in an ideal world, I would love to go 15-0.
Yeah.
But I don't think in today's college football that's possible. So let me ask you a question. Would you rather beat Georgia in the SEC championship or would you rather win a national championship?
Yeah, that's fair. It's sad that we have to think that way, but the current system, is tough, man.
They've made the championship game meaningless. It can hurt you more than it can help you. Now here's a crazy scenario. Okay, I think Utah is the best team on the West Coast. I think USC is good but overrated, and I think Utah will beat them again. I think Utah makes the Final Four. But Michigan's down. Ohio State is very down. What if Georgia beats Tennessee in the regular season, gets to the SEC championship 12-0, Alabama loses to Tennessee during the regular season, so Tennessee's 11-1, Alabama beats LSU and makes it to the SEC championship, so they're both sitting at 11-1. Georgia's 12-0, and Alabama upsets Georgia in the SEC championship. That would have Alabama at 12-1, with their only loss being to Tennessee. At that time, Tennessee's RPI or strength of schedule will probably be higher than Alabama's. Georgia would be sitting at 12-1, with their only loss being to Alabama, and Tennessee would be sitting at 11-1, with their only loss to Georgia. I think you could make a strong case that 3 of the 4 teams in the playoff are SEC teams.
And depending on how the Big 10 play and Big 12 play out, yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's nobody in those conferences. They're terrible this year.
It's going to be, well, Texas may make a run at it in the Big 12. Of course, people say that every year and it never happens.
The other day on Mac and Cube, they had Texas's primary media guy on there. Do you know the last time Texas won 10 games in a season?
2007.
Yep. It's been almost 20 years since they've won 10 games, not even 11 or 12, 10. So not worried about Texas being a part of this conversation.
I like what Mr. Jones said. Mr. Jones said, if we beat Bama, they're going to need a new goalpost.
It's possible.
I love it. That's awesome. He said, I've never picked Tennessee to lose a game ever. Joe Milton is the best quarterback in the SEC. I think that's going to be proven this year. I think people will know Joe is the best quarterback. Zach said if he had to pick, he'd choose a Natty over an SEC championship. Mr. Jones says Tennessee's going undefeated from here on out until the end of time.
Would you like to place a wager on that?
We never lost a game. We just ran out of time. I get it, man. I love that. There you go. And he said, I'd rather lose to Bama than Georgia. To get to the SEC championship.
Do you see Kevin's comment there about 3?
I'm going to go back playoffs. Kevin has made 3 comments that I want to go back to. Kevin said, and I was waiting until we got done with Georgia, and then I was going to go back to these. He said, I don't know if we're still talking about Bama or not, but I got them going 8-4, 9-3. So, Kevin, my question to you is, and by the way, Kevin's a good friend of mine. Good to see you on here, Kevin. Kevin, let us know in the comments who those losses are to in Alabama's schedule, because I'm curious to know who you think they're going to lose to. He said that UT LSU in the SEC championship game, that can certainly happen. 100%. That could definitely happen.
Sure.
And he said, let's see, every other fan base apart from SEC fans would collectively lose their minds. They already say there's SEC bias about if 3 of the 4 teams got in. Yeah. And he said his 3 losses are Texas, Tennessee, and LSU. Well, that certainly could happen. Absolutely.
So the flip side of that conversation is the committee could actually use that as their opportunity to say, see, this is why we got to go to a 12-team playoff.
Yep. This is it's gonna be fascinating to see how it all shakes out. All right, Kentucky. We're gonna pick up the pace a little bit here. Kentucky, I have them going 8-4, 4-4 in conference play, with those 4 losses being to Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and South Carolina. I don't think going to South Carolina in late November is a positive thing, as evidenced by last year for Tennessee. And so I think that game, South Carolina still has Spencer Rattler. I think that they're gonna take care of business at home against Kentucky. So I have them going 8-4, 5 and wait, I got them going 8-4, 4-4. Yeah, in the SEC. What about you?
Exact same, all the way across the board. And we just talked about November 18th. They go to South Carolina. That's going to be the night game on ESPN. because Tennessee, Georgia will be the 3:30 game. So not only do they have to go to South Carolina, they're going to go to Carolina at night, and we all know what that's like. But
The grass will be too high. There will be sand all over the field.
right. So we all know what's going to happen. Mark Stoops will go 8-4. They'll make it to some meaningless bowl, probably the Music City, and then he'll get a contract extension through 2047 and make $500,000 more a year till then. And they'll build a massive statue out in front of the stadium for 3 consecutive 8-4 seasons playing no one. Perfect memory of Mark Stoops.
So Zach said he's got him going 7-5. We both said 8-4. So Zach, tell us who that extra loss is that you feel like Kentucky will have. Kevin said Kentucky. Zach said, I bet $500 of Rustin's money for that Tennessee might lose a game in sometime in the future, sometime ever.
In perpetuity.
Yeah. Mr. Jones said the refs seem to screw Tennessee more than any other team. Purdue bowl game, man, that's bringing up 2 seasons ago now.
Let's not go back there.
Robert, I like it, man. Robert said the Vols are going to win it all this season. Hey, if you make it in the playoff, who knows what can happen then? I mean, that's the goal. All you got to do is get to the playoff. All you got to do. That's incredibly difficult, but if you get to the playoff, anything can happen at that point. That's the point. And so that's exactly right. If Tennessee makes it to the playoff, which they very well could, then yes, they can win it all. I totally agree. Zach said his 5 losses are Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Bama. So he added in Mississippi State. Now, Mississippi State is going to be a little bit down this year, but it's an interesting pick because for some reason, that is always a close game. Always. And I don't know why, but it always is. And so I think that's very intriguing because they do have to go to Mississippi State. And let's be honest,
in between Tennessee and Bama.
Yeah. I think that's a really good pick because let's be honest, Mississippi State knows they're not going to have many opportunities to win SEC games this year. And so they know that's a game on their calendar that an SEC game they could win. And so they're going to come out guns ablaze in that game. I love that pick, actually. I think that's a good pick.
It's possible.
Zach talking about, anything can happen. He said, yeah, look at TCU. I mean, they make it to the national championship game last year. Absolutely. He said, I got to agree, but change Mississippi State to misery. Yeah, they're not going to have a great season down there. That's for sure. All right, LSU. Here's an interesting one. What do you think, Rustin?
So I've got LSU going 11-1. Let me pull up my notes here. I just lost them. There they are. I've got them going 11-1. I think their one loss is Alabama, and that's what gets Alabama in the SEC championship. And the only reason I think Alabama wins is because it is at Alabama. So I've got them 11-1, and then 7-1 in the conference. I think their schedule honestly is very similar to Alabama's in that pretty much, other than Alabama, all of LSU's tough games are at home.
Yep.
So, I think it lays out really nicely for them, and I think they easily go 11-1. I'm not a big believer in Florida State. I think that opener down in Orlando is going to be a boat race, and everybody's going to immediately start questioning Florida State again. So I've got them at 11-1, with the only loss being at Alabama.
I totally agree, and I literally the exact same prediction. I think the only game that could be kind of intriguing is that at Ole Miss game. I think that could be interesting. But I think the Arkansas game at home will be a close game, but LSU will win. But I totally agree. I think 11-1, only loss to Alabama. All right. So the other half of the conference. Zach said he's got them going 9-3 with losses to Florida State, Bama, and Ole Miss. Yeah, I think that at Ole Miss game, and they have to go to Bama. That's not going to be easy, obviously. But that at Ole Miss game, it's going to be intriguing. It'll be interesting to see. Mr. Jones, he's struggling, man. He's thinking about some bad memories from the past. He's talking about officials bias against Tennessee. Now he's moved on to the Titans, the Tennessee Vols, the Memphis Grizzlies. Oh man, it's okay, buddy. Let's talk about 2023. We're not Battervall syndrome. We're Battervall syndrome survivors now, is what we are. That's right. Everybody can get your shirt on the volbros.com. He says LSU's going 0-12. So this this is my favorite comment so far because he said Alabama's going 0-12. and
They're going to
LSU is
tie and
also
they call
going
it a double
0-12.
loss.
I love it. That's my favorite comment yet. That's awesome. That's fantastic. All right. So Mississippi State. This is he said he had a relapse of battered ball syndrome. I understand, but hey, we're survivors now, buddy. All right, so Mississippi State. Okay, I don't think I need to give a public service announcement like I did for Florida, because Florida is used to. Wow, I don't know if you could hear those fireworks or not, but somebody's shooting fireworks outside right now. Florida has a standard that they're used to meeting, and they're not going to be anywhere close to it this year. Not even close to it. And it ain't going to be that way next year either, which is why I don't think Billy Napier is going to be there in 2025. But for Mississippi State, I think they know what's coming this year. I think they expect what's coming this year. Reluctantly, of course, but I don't think this is going to be pretty for them. What do you got for Mississippi State?
Unfortunately, 4-8 at best, 0-8 in the conference, and I could easily see them going 2-10.
Yeah.
I talked about this about a month ago. Zach Arnett is a fantastic defensive coordinator. Their defense is going to do a good job, but he made the most bizarre decision ever, changing offensive coordinators. You have one of the top quarterbacks in America coming back, running the air raid. He has never done anything else. And the air raid is a very different system than every other system. The footwork's different, the timing's different, everything is different. The block schemes, everything's different. And instead of going out and hiring an air raid guy and just continuing to run the raid with a quarterback who has proven he can win you games doing it, he switches to a pro-style quarterback or offensive coordinator, and now they're having to reinvent their quarterback. And there wasn't a whole lot of other skill guys on the offensive side of the ball that were any good. So he basically took the one bright spot they had on offense and intentionally made it average. So I think it's going to prove to be a massive mistake. Like I say, I think 4-8, but I could easily see them losing to Arizona and Southern Miss, because Southern Miss is sandwiched in between A&M and Ole Miss. So I could easily see them overlooking Southern Miss coming in and just outscoring them by a little bit and winning that one too. So I don't foresee a good year for Mississippi State. I think it's going to be a train wreck. I think they'll be lucky to win 4 games.
I totally agree. I have them going 3-9, 0-8 in the SEC. The 3 games I have them winning are the SLU game. I'm guessing that's St. Louis. I don't know.
Yeah, it's southeast
Louisiana. There you go. I got them beating Arizona, which that could be very easily be a loss. And I have them beating Western Michigan, which, let's be honest, that could be a loss. Western Michigan has been known to be spoiler over the years. And I actually have them losing to Southern Miss as well. Southern Miss is good. They've always been, a good second, tier team. Group of 5 team. They've always been, they've played spoiler so many times. Tennessee has almost been the recipient of that in the past. But we've seen them be spoiler of a lot of people. And so I think Southern Miss beats them, which really isn't good for Mississippi State, because then they'll have lost to both Southern Miss and Ole Miss. So they'd be the worst team in Mississippi at that point in back-to-back weeks. Um, I don't think it's going to be a good year for them. I think 3-9, and honestly, 2-10, and maybe even 1-11. I mean, like it. They really need to beat Southeast Louisiana to start the season. That's the bottom line. Don't look past game one because you need game one. Kevin said 5-7 or 6-6. Zach said 5-7. Mr. Jones said 6-6. Mike Leach, Angel on the Gridiron, gets to a bowl. There you go. I like it.
It's going to take something miraculous for this team to win 6 games.
Yep. It's not going to be an easy schedule. That's for sure. Not going to be an easy road. All right. So Missouri, what you got?
So I've never been shy about how much I dislike Eli Drinkwitz. I think he's the second most overrated coach in the SEC behind Mark Stoops, but he's easily the most irritating one. I've got him at 5-7. I just don't think he's a very good coach. I think he's always been an average coach. And I think this year he's got a schedule that's not going to allow him to be average. It's going to expose his weaknesses. So I've got him at 5-7. I could even see them at 4-8 because that week 2 game against Middle Tennessee State, I could see them overlooking that, looking ahead to Kansas State the next week, and MTSU can score some points. Miami found that out the hard way. So I could easily see Mississippi or Middle Tennessee State sneaking in there and upsetting them, and them finishing 4-8. I don't see anything positive on this schedule for Missouri, and maybe 2 SEC wins, maybe.
Yeah, I've got them going 4-8, 2-6 in the SEC. I have them beating South Dakota, MTSU, which I'm going to be honest, it took me a second to pick that one because MTSU they're good. They can get up and down the field a little bit.
Went down to Florida and beat Miami.
Yeah. So I mean, that one wasn't an easy pick, but I did pick them to beat MTSU. I think they're going to lose to Kansas State and Memphis. I don't think they're beating either one of them. And then I have them beating Vanderbilt. And then the only other game I have them winning is Florida because it's a home game in late November. That's it. 4-8, 2-6 in the SEC.
I had them beating South Dakota, Middle Tennessee State, Memphis, Vanderbilt, and Florida. That was my 5, but I could easily see them losing to MTSU.
Yep. Kevin said he has them going 7-5. Their defense kind of scares him. Zach said 5-7. And now, man, I'm telling you what, the Vol Bros, this is just an awesome podcast because we got film ideas happening right now in the comments. Mr. Jones now has a whole movie idea, Angels in the End Zone, just like Angels in the Outfield. That's what Zach was saying. I love it, man. That's what I'm talking about. I love it. Fantastic. All right. So that brings us to Ole Miss. This is a very intriguing one in my opinion.
Yeah.
I have them going 8-4, 4-4 in the SEC. Here's my losses for them. Well, first of all, I have them beating Tulane, but that's going to be a good game. Like week 2 matchup, that's going to be a big matchup. I'm really looking forward to that actually. But I have them losing to Alabama, LSU, Arkansas, and Georgia. Those were my 4 losses. No, wait. I had them beating Arkansas and losing to A&M. That's what it was. Well, now I'm second guessing myself. I'm trying to look back at my Arkansas predictions. So Arkansas, I had them losing to Ole Miss. Okay, because it's a home game for Ole Miss. That's what it was.
Right.
So I have them losing at Alabama. I should have written it down. I remember thinking, I'll remember. It's okay. I have them losing at Alabama, home against LSU, and then A&M, I bet, was the other one. So losing at home to A&M and losing at Georgia. So those 4 games, Alabama, LSU, A&M, and Georgia, are my 4 losses for them.
So I had them at 7-5 with losses to Alabama, LSU, Arkansas, Texas A&M, and Georgia. But I could also very, very easily see them at 9-3 beating Arkansas and Texas A&M. So I think Lane Kiffin will do very, very well offensively this year. He's got a lot of weapons back, and the difference for them between 7-5 and 9-3 is how well his defensive coordinator calls games. If his defense can get off the field, I think they could very easily finish 9-3. If his defense continues to struggle, I could see them going 7-5.
So now I'm really second guessing myself because I just checked my Texas A&M prediction, and I have them losing to Ole Miss as well. So I don't know what my other. Maybe it was Tulane. Maybe that's the one I thought about. But then it wouldn't be a conference game.
That's a tough early season game.
That's interesting. All right, let's see. Zach said he has Ole Miss going 10-2. Who's the 2 losses, Zach? I'm curious. Who are the 2 losses? Kevin said he might be going to the Tulane game. That's cool. He says 9-3. So I'm curious, who are those 3 losses? Hey, I like where you're thinking here, Mr. Jones. He said Tennessee won the first BCS national championship. What if they win the first 12-team playoff championship next year? That'd be cool. I love it. Hey, that's great with me. So let's see what Zach and Kevin say here about who they think those losses will be against. Because this one, it's just so up in the air. Like, I mean, they could win, they could go 10-2, and then they could go 8-4. I mean, like, it's just it could be any. It's so varied. He says Georgia and A&M, so he has them beating Alabama, which Ole Miss. I mean, it's been
And
Hugh
LSU.
Freeze, really, and LSU. Yep.
He's saying they're beating both.
Which, if that were to happen, that would put Ole Miss potentially in the SEC championship game. Right. If they lose to Georgia and A&M, that'd be huge for Lane Kiffin. LSU says LSU, Georgia, and A&M. So they both have them beating Alabama, which could happen. I mean, the quarterback situation at LSU is much more stable condition than it is at Alabama currently.
You mean Ole Miss?
When was the last time we could say that? I guess maybe Joe Burrow. Very, very interesting there. Very interesting. That one's just a toss up, man. Like it could go so many different directions. So many different directions. Everybody in the SEC West is going 0-12. They're all going to lose to each other somehow, and I love it. I love it, Mr. Jones. That's great.
South Carolina.
Zach said, I don't trust LSU. Kevin said, I'm very low on Bama this year with their quarterback situation and new coordinators. I'd say their quarterback situation is the most concerning thing if you're a Bama fan. For anybody who's a Bama fan. All right, so South Carolina.
I would encourage Cole Kublik, who's an Auburn alum and who, absolutely is not a Bama fan, said something on his show the other day that I would encourage Kevin to go think about. Look at every position in the SEC and go, who has the best player in the conference at that position? I think you'll be stunned how many of them are Alabama. I agree. New offensive coordinator can be problematic. Quarterback controversy can be problematic. Even new defensive coordinator can be problematic, but there's a history there. They know Kevin Steele. It's Jimmy's and Joe's. And if you go position by position through the SEC, and Alabama has the best player at more positions than anybody else, great players make coaches look really good. So I would not at all undervalue what they can do.
Well, and my thing about Alabama this year is just it's going to be a revenge year for them. That's my thing. Saban has used that masterfully over the years. They're going to win some games purely based off of him willing them to victory in some of them. What do you got for South Carolina this year?
This one pains me because I cannot stand Shane Beamer. So I have South Carolina at 8-4, with their 4 losses being Georgia, Tennessee, Clemson, and at Texas A&M.
So you would have them at 8-4, 4-4 in the SEC.
Correct.
So I've got them at 7-5, 5-3 in the SEC.
So you think North Carolina is going to beat them?
Mm-hmm. So I've got them at or did you have them? You had Clemson as one of their losses too, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I got to fix that slide. So you had them 5-3 in the SEC as well, because one of the losses would have been Clemson.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, gotcha. Oh wait, no, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Yeah, I had that right on the slide. I got the next slide up on the screen next to it to me. I was looking at the wrong line. I got it right on there. So yeah, my fifth. I have all the same losses as you. My fifth loss is North Carolina. Drake May, dude, he's a player. I mean, that's going to be fun to watch. North Carolina this year. I think that first game, I think Drake May is going to make a strong statement that first game. I think it's going to be points out the wazoo that game, because I don't think either defense is going to slow down the other team. So it'll be an entertaining game, no doubt. And I think they go 7-5, 5-3 in the SEC, with that losses to North Carolina, Georgia. That's a tough first half of your season there. You got to play North Carolina, go to Georgia, go to Tennessee. They're going to start out 2-3, in my opinion, and then finish up the season, 7-5. So let's see.
I could see that. I think the one thing that could slow them down against North Carolina, Chip Lindsey's back, calling plays for North Carolina. That will help Drake May. And South Carolina is going to be breaking in a new OC. So he's going to be calling plays for the first time for those guys. And it's just different. You can plan all you want, you can practice all you want, but until you're in the fray calling plays when it matters, it's just a different game.
Kevin said he's got them going 6-6 with losses to North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee by 50. That actually might happen with Tennessee. I guarantee you Heupel will not slow down anything that game.
If he can hang 100 that night, he will.
He's got them losing at Missouri. It's at Missouri. It's very possible. A&M and Clemson. Let's see. Zach said he's got them at 6-6 as well. Mr. Jones bringing the heat with the dad one-liners here, dad jokes. Drake may, but Drake may not. But and Zach's getting in on the action now too. He said, or Drake Mayo. The condiment humor is next level. I'm loving it.
I'm going to go ahead and predict Mr. Jones is going to say they're going to be 0-12.
I love it. All right. The Vols, the Big Orange. Now, just so everybody knows, we'll go, if you want a more in-depth look at our prediction for the 2023 season, you can go watch that on our channel. I'll try to remember to put a link to it in the description of this video when we're done. But we have a video already out that we predict, we go game by game through the whole season, and we strongly encourage everybody to go watch that. It's done pretty well. It's got, I don't know, I can't remember how many, it's a few thousand at least views. I think last time it was up around 15 or 20,000, so that's cool. So I strongly encourage everybody to go check out the our season prediction video. Um, I'm loving some of the predictions already coming in, but Rustin, tell us your prediction for Tennessee.
So I would absolutely love to be 15-0. That would be phenomenal. It would be a season for the ages. I just don't think it's doable. Too many things happen. The ball bounces weird. There's too much parity at the top. I would rather be 11-1 in the regular season and coast into the playoffs. I think there's also a benefit to even possibly losing to Georgia in that regular season game, because once Josh Heupel can see how Georgia wants to play them and pick apart the weaknesses, now he's got a tailor-made game plan for the game that really matters in the playoffs. And again, if we can go 15-0, by all means, go 15-0, win everything you see. That would be phenomenal. But if that's not possible, I would rather be 11-1 in the regular season, walk into the playoffs unscathed and healthy and ready with a game plan for the one team that beat us, and win the national championship, because the SEC championship means nothing.
Well, two things there. Number one, you mentioned if they play Georgia, not if they play, but when they play Georgia, if they play them again in the playoff, let's be totally honest, that's going to be in the championship game. Because one thing that we have seen the playoff committee do is they will not put two teams in the same conference in a semifinal game. We've seen that happen twice now in the playoff system. They strategically moved the seeding to where two teams, and it was the SEC both times, two teams in the SEC won't play each other in the semifinal game, which is why Rustin earlier said that Tennessee would probably be a 3 seed in the playoff if they were to lose to Georgia, because that means they would be playing the 2 seed, because Georgia would be the 1 seed, assuming they win the SEC championship game. And I totally agree. And I don't think, I don't think Rustin is saying that the SEC championship, I don't think he is saying that it means absolutely nothing. Of course, everybody likes winning the SEC championship. But in the grand scheme of things, I think he's saying if you had to pick, you'd probably rather play for a national championship. And so it is interesting. Obviously, everybody would love to go 15-0. Everybody would love that. It's just really, really tough to do. It's extremely difficult to do. So I have Tennessee going 11-1, but I have them losing one game, and that's at Bama, just because it's at Bama, and they're going to have that game circled. And I mean, it's going to be crazy down there. And so in my scenario, that means Tennessee's in the SEC championship game. Now, here's what scares me about my scenario. If Tennessee loses to Alabama and they make it to the SEC championship game, the way that I picked the rest of the season, they would play Alabama again in the SEC championship game under my scenario, my predictions. I don't want to play Bama twice in one season, but I would rather play them on a neutral site than at Tuscaloosa.
Yeah.
And so, that could be in Tennessee's favor going into that game. And it would be on turf, and we're running the ball, chucking it up and down the field the whole game long. So they're hopefully that rematch would work out in Tennessee's favor. But that's the way that I currently have it. So it is interesting. It's very interesting. We have Tennessee both going 11-1. And it almost could be that the easier path to the playoff is losing to Georgia and not going to the SEC championship game. the best thing would just be beat everybody and go 15-0. I hope that happens. But it is interesting to think about what would be the easier path to the SEC championship game. And I think it's important that we're not the only people who have thought that way tonight. There was a Georgia fan on here earlier who commented, Doug. He's our good friend, Doug. And Doug said that he thinks Tennessee's beat Georgia in Neyland, but that's going to allow Georgia into the back door in the playoff. Like he sees that too from the other perspective. It's just fascinating how I guess we just need to say we just need to go 15-0 and not leave it up to anybody's decision. Don't just take it out of the committee's hands. You just go 15-0. Hopefully that happens.
There's one other reason I think the SEC championship doesn't matter. I'm going to predict within 3 years there will be no conference championships. Maybe sooner.
I totally agree with that.
Because as soon as they go to a 12-team playoff, every coach in America is going to be screaming that they don't want to play one extra game.
Yeah.
And the money is in the playoff. It's not in the SEC championship. Yeah. So I think these conference championship games are going to become a thing of the past that no one even pays any attention to.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I can't remember for sure, but when they release the dates, they've already released the dates for the 2024 playoff. And it was either the week after the SEC championship game or 2 weeks after. And I think it was the week after.
It was the week after.
And so they won't even have a bye week unless you're in the top 4 seeds.
Right.
And so, I mean, there's going to be people saying, hey, let's take a step back here. I think that could certainly happen. People are going to say, well, all the people in the SEC are going to be, the SEC office is really going to struggle with letting it go because of the money. But if they see massive revenue coming in from getting 4 or 5 teams in the 12-team playoff, then they might be like, okay, all right, that's fine too.
The playoff royalties would more than surpass whatever they would make on the SEC championship.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes down because that will become a discussion in 3 years from now. That'll be the talk. I would say probably within 4 or 5 years we might see it gone. But it's going to take. It's not going to be easy getting rid of that game. But I think there'll be some people who might want it gone. Zach said 12-0 and no losses. Love it. Mr. Jones said 15-0. Believing's half the battle. Kevin said 15-0. He said that when we're talking about potentially losing the game, he said that's battered Vol syndrome talking. I love it. Rustin said, you got to return your Vol card, Rustin. You weren't red under that orange. I think he explained his mindset there. Mr. Jones said, we're 15-0 if Hooker didn't get hurt. Wait, but we lost to Georgia before Hendon got hurt. South Carolina sabotaged the field of Pauls. Okay, now I am not a big conspiracy theorist. However,
they absolutely did.
There was a lot of sand on that field. Like they had just top dressed the field that morning. It seemed like that was very, very odd that there was that much sand on the field that game. And he said beating Bama twice would be all the sweeter. I totally agree with that. 100%. Absolutely. Twice in one season. Love it. Kevin said every coach equals Saban. About requesting to not do the playoff or the SEC championship game.
I'm going to tell you right now, every coach in the SEC, if they were told, and they have been, if they're told, here's the schedule, you're going to finish your games at the end of November, we're going to play the SEC championship the first weekend in December, and then the very next week you're going to play a playoff game, there's not a coach in the SEC that would say, yeah, that sounds great, let's do that. Every one of them would say, let's cancel that silly championship games. We need to heal up. We need time to rest and recover. We want our best on the field for the game that matters.
Yeah, that's fair. Because here's another thing. These teams that are going to be that let's say like let's talk about like South Carolina for example this upcoming season. Uh, we both have them predicted to go 8-4. I think
Mm-hmm.
you have them going 8-4.
Yep.
I have them going 7-5. So 7-5, 8-4. They would be in a bowl game, but they would not be in the playoff at either one of those records. So they're going to get 15 extra practices there. Here's what's interesting for teams in the bowl playoff. After they lose, let's say you lose in the first round of that playoff. Are you done? Can you not have any more practices? That'll be interesting because it could actually be not detrimental because you're in the playoff, but it could be less helpful to your team's practice schedule if you lose
Yeah.
in the first round of the play. There could be teams that have literally 2 times as many, if not 3 times as many practices as you if you lose in the first round of the playoff. And these other teams aren't even in the playoff. And so I think that's another reason why you might have people saying, let's take a week to take this SEC championship game off to have 2 weeks of practice before the playoff starts.
Something else along those lines that's been brought up that they have not resolved yet. If I play in the second week of December and lose in my first round of my playoff game, and the Music City Bowl is December 28th, can the Music City Bowl send me a bid and get a better team for their bowl game if I'm willing to come?
That's very interesting.
That gives me 2 extra weeks of practice with all my freshmen, more time with them, more time to rep the things I need to rep that they haven't gotten to do. I mean, we all know the best players won't play in that game. They'll all sit it out, but it's an extra money game for me. I can get all my freshman reps. Could be an option.
Zach said, but that's tradition to have that game. You have to keep some stuff. I get that totally. Fun fact, Rustin and I were actually at the very first SEC championship game ever at Legion Field in Birmingham, Alabama. That was a fun fact.
I would just say to that was in 1992. So it's sort of a tradition, but this is only the 31st year for the SEC championship. So, the bowl games that are going to take precedent, the Rose Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, all of those, the games that are going to be the Sugar Bowl, the games that are going to be a part of the playoff, they've been around a whole lot longer than the SEC championship.
Mr. Jones said, not Heupel. He wouldn't want to not have that championship game. Well, let's say this, because I think I don't want us to misunderstand each other. What we're saying is it's not like there would just not be an SEC champion. There would still be an SEC champion.
Yeah.
It would just be a regular season champion.
Right.
And because there will be no divisions. And so it'll just be a regular season champion.
Right.
There just wouldn't be a championship game after it. Because let's table that just for a second, because that could be an interesting discussion.
And I would also say this: we're not saying that these coaches are ducking the game. Right. They're just using common sense. This is a grind. By the time they get to December, these guys, nobody's healthy. They're all banged up. Everybody's in treatment all the time, trying to get healed up. And adding one more game into the mix is not good for them. And especially if it's a game that could potentially hurt your chances in the playoffs, why play it? Like it doesn't make sense.
Well, consider Tennessee last year. Let's say that the 12-team playoff had been a thing last year. And let's say that Tennessee was potentially in contention to go to the SEC championship game. The competitor in you and the competitor in Heupel, of course, he's going to want to play in that game. But then also you got to think, but wait a second. They had 6 defensive backs who were injured. Could an extra week of rest gotten one of them back? Maybe. It's an interesting discussion that time will tell what ends up happening. Mr. Jones said Saban equals Satan. He wears the red A. It's a devil head if you flip it upside down. Holy cow.
Okay. Texas A&M.
Getting into theology here. All right. Oh, gotcha. I understand what you're saying now. All right, so Texas A&M. I honestly thought Tennessee would go faster than that. I love it. It's great. All right, Texas A&M. I got them going 7-5, 3-5 in the SEC. So I know that this is not going to be popular. I get that, but I have them going 7-5, 3-5 in the SEC. Here are their losses. Now this is where it gets really interesting because they're going to start 4-0, and everybody's going to be like, "Uh-oh, Bobby Petrino coming in there, man. They got this thing rolling now. They got it cooking." And then, uh-oh, they're going to lose to Arkansas, lose to Alabama, lose at Tennessee. They're going to beat South Carolina, lose at Ole Miss, and lose at LSU. So I have them going 7-5, 3-5 in the SEC. And it's going to be the biggest 180 turn mid-season of any team in the SEC, because everybody's going to be like, "Oh, they got it rolling now. They got it cooking." And then all of a sudden, nope. What do you think?
I think we will know by the end of September exactly what this team is. If they are 4-1 at the end of September, then I think they finish 8-4. I could easily also see them 2-3 at the end of September. If Jimbo Fisher legitimately allows Bobby Petrino to take the reins and call this offense, I could easily see them sitting at 4-1, with the only loss being to Arkansas at the end of September. But if the internal stuff that's been leaking out all over the place continues, and there's a power struggle and there's all kinds of internal problems, and week 2 they lose at Miami, and then week 4 they're playing Auburn, and this is Hugh Freeze's one game upset of the year, and then they lose to Arkansas the next week, so they're 2-3. Then they lose to Alabama 2-4. Then they lose to Tennessee 2-5. Now the snowball's in effect. They slip up and beat South Carolina 3-5, but then the next week they go to Ole Miss and lose that 3-6. They beat Mississippi State and ACU 5-6. Then they lose to LSU 5-7. And Arkansas's money, people all pull their money and pay Jimbo Fisher's buyout, and this thing is over. I could see them literally going anywhere from 8-4 to 5-7, depending on how those first 5 games go.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. Mr. Jones said they're going 0-12. He also said it's Jimbo's actual name. I think it's a nickname. I think it's his nickname. I like Kevin's prediction. He took it a step further. He said they're going 7-5, and Walter Nolan transfers to UT at the end of the year.
You don't want him.
So, the whole storyline this whole season for Texas A&M is going to be how well Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Petrino play together, and we'll see that probably by mid-October at the latest. We'll know for sure how things are going down there. All right, and the last one, the Commodores of Vanderbilt. What you got for them, Rustin?
Well, I like Clark Lee. I think he's a great defensive coordinator, but he's Jeremy Pruitt 2.0. He's a great defensive coordinator who just can't put it together as a head coach. Add on top of it, I don't think their schedule is kind. I've got them at 2-10, with their only wins being Alabama A&M. Do what?
And let me say one thing about this. You'll notice on this particular graphic, they have 2 open dates. Everybody else only has 1. That's because, like I mentioned at the beginning, their first game is against Hawaii, and Kevin actually just mentioned that too. Their first game is the week before this, so this slide starts on September 2nd, which is week 1. They have a week 0 game the week before that against Hawaii in Nashville. And so they do open the season with Hawaii, but that's why that game isn't on this particular screen.
I've got them winning the first 2 and then losing 10 straight.
That 100% could happen, yes.
And for those of you who don't know and you're looking at that and going, but UNLV's on there. The new head football coach at UNLV is Barry Odom. Barry Odom is an excellent football coach. And for those of you who haven't been following it, he has been raiding the portal like Deion Sanders. He will have a team, and they will play the best defense you've ever seen, and they will find a way. I'll bet it right now. They will find a way, and they will beat Vanderbilt.
And it's at UNLV too.
Right.
So you got to go across the country. Weird stuff happens, man, when you travel across country. Weird stuff happens. Teams don't show up sometimes. It's just the way it goes. I have them going, let's see. I have them at 3-9, 0-8 in the SEC. But I could very easily see them going 1-11. I think the only game they will certainly win is the Alabama A&M game. I think they'll squeak by Hawaii to start the season. And I think they'll squeak by UNLV, but they might not. Either one of those games. So I don't think they're going to beat Auburn. I think Hugh Freeze will have them figured out by November. I don't think it's going to be a good year for the Commodores. Don't think it's going to be a good year. Mr. Jones, saloon doors. Nice. Everyone barrels through them. Nice. Very nice. Bringing the A game there. So before we answer Kevin's question, let's look at what we're saying then for this season's predictions. Here is what I'm predicting to be the end result of each division. I'm saying that Alabama and LSU will both be 11-1 at the end of the year in the West, but the tiebreaker will be that Alabama beat LSU head-to-head. And so Alabama will go to the SEC championship game. In the East, I have both Tennessee and Georgia finishing 11-1. But the tiebreaker is Tennessee beat Georgia. And so Tennessee goes to the SEC championship game. That's how, based on what we've said, that's how both of us have this whole season shaken out. Or how I had it shaken out. Rustin had it Alabama and LSU. Once again, Alabama wins the tiebreaker because they beat LSU head-to-head. And then Georgia, Tennessee. Georgia goes undefeated. So we both have Alabama in the SEC championship game. I have Tennessee, and Rustin has Georgia in the SEC championship game. But here's what I'm most actually excited about for this whole episode. What if this were 2024? And all that mattered, there were no divisions. And all that mattered was who has the best record. Let's look at what happens there. This would be how my scenario would have played out. Alabama would have been the SEC regular season champion because they would have gone 8-0 in the conference. But see, this is just a hypothetical situation or prediction, and there's already controversy because look at number 2. LSU and Tennessee would be tied for number 2. So the question then becomes, if this were next year, how do you break that tie? Because the thing with that is next year, or in this situation, you'd say, well, head-to-head, but they don't play each other. So then you'd say, okay, well, common opponent. Well, the common opponent was Alabama in this situation, and Alabama beat both of them. So what are you using as the tiebreaker? Because Georgia, even though they're 11-1 and 7-1 in the SEC, Tennessee would have beaten them this year, which would put them above them. And so then you're like, well, between LSU and Tennessee, there is no other common opponent other than Alabama who beat both of them. So what I mean, Kevin said, could it be points scored? I mean, maybe. I mean, I don't know. Like,
The next tiebreaker would typically be point differential.
And so you got to figure that favors Tennessee.
Yeah.
But I mean, like this is fascinating because we're not even to this yet. This is next year, and we're already seeing potential for what happens. Like
Yeah.
like I mean, strength of schedule. I thought about that. Like they could potentially do strength of schedule. And Mr. Jones said the same thing. Strength of schedule. I mean, it's really interesting to see what could shake out when you look at Ruston's situation. So here's where this is even potentially more intriguing. The way Ruston had it predicted, he said that Georgia goes undefeated. They're the only team in the SEC that would be undefeated. If this were next year, kind of thing. So they would beat regular season champion. They're in the SEC championship game. But then there's a 3-way tie for second between Tennessee, Alabama, and LSU. Once again, the common opponent here is Alabama, and they're actually the people they're the people who would determine this, because in this scenario, Alabama beat LSU, but Tennessee beat Alabama.
Yeah.
And so you would think that would put Tennessee ahead, but people at LSU could say, but wait a minute, Tennessee didn't beat us. And Tennessee's only loss would be Georgia, who was the number 1 team. So I would have to think that this is how they would shake out. They would have Tennessee as the number 2 getting the bid to the SEC championship game, since they beat Alabama, who beat LSU. I would have to think this was how it would shake out. So it's interesting because, this could be, if you had asked someone 6 years ago, if there were no divisions, which division would be more likely to get 2 teams into an SEC championship game, 100 out of 100 people would have said the SEC West. But in this scenario, if this were next year and there were no divisions, the first year that it happened, it would be 2 SEC East teams that got into the SEC championship game. It's going to be bizarre to watch it unfold. Absolutely bizarre. It's going to be wild, man. It's going to be wild. Okay, so Mr. Jones said somehow Tennessee would get the shaft here, and he said, they had Alabama ahead of us after we beat them last year, and we were both 10-2. That's right. The selection committee had that. That's right. But they wouldn't be. That would be the college football playoff selection committee. They wouldn't be involved in this scenario, and so this would just have to be. I'm just very curious, because if we go back to what I was saying, if there were no divisions this year, how would they decide between that LSU Tennessee tiebreaker if this played out the way I predicted it would? It's a fascinating thing about. Zach, we appreciate you joining us, man. He said, got to go. Love the show as always in VFL. And we appreciate you joining us, Zach. So this is the most intriguing thing to me. What if there were no divisions this year and this ended up happening? How can you break the tie between LSU and Tennessee if the only loss each team had was to the same team that was the number 1 champion of the league? There's going to be people not happy. I'm just saying there's going to be people not happy. Very, very interesting. So before we end, let's go back to the question Kevin had just a minute ago, because I think it's a great question. He said, how do y'all think Alex Golish will do at USF? You go ahead, Rustin, and then I'll give my thoughts.
So if you look at his schedule, he got a very favorable schedule. He inherited a decent roster. There was a lot of good players down at South Florida. There's just a lot of good players in Florida in general. He's done a good job in the portal, finding some guys to add in. and he got a Baylor transfer at quarterback that he's excited about. I saw a interview that he did the other day, and he was raving about Gary Bohannon, who transferred from Baylor. So you have to think that Coach Golish is not the type to blow smoke. He's very factual. He does not ride the emotional roller coaster. So if he's excited and thinks he's got a roster that can do some things, the way his schedule lays out, I could very easily see them going 7-5. They've got a very very positive schedule for them. And so, I think he could make some waves early on there, and especially if Gary Bohannon walks in and plays well for him, that system travels. It's scored everywhere it's gone. So, I could easily see him doing very well in year one.
Yeah, and it's exciting for Alex because they just announced they're building a campus on or a stadium on campus because they don't currently have one. And so that's exciting for him that they're going to be able to have an on-campus stadium. They're getting behind him. The athletic department's getting behind him to support him. So that's really encouraging to see. And I'm happy for him in that respect. I do think that week 3 game against Alabama is going to be pretty interesting because Alex was in the booth last year when we beat him. He knows what you have to do. Now, does he have the Jimmies and Joes? Probably not. But does he have the Jimmies and Joes to keep it close for a while? Yeah, buddy.
And bare minimum, Josh Heupel
huge.
gets a amazing scouting report in advance because however they defend South Florida is how they're going to defend us.
Absolutely, 100%. That's a huge benefit to Tennessee that they're playing at South Florida. And so, I think it'll be closer than the experts think for at least the first half. I think Bama pulls away in the second half, but I'm excited for him. I think that Rustin's exactly right when he says he shoots straight with people. He was the best interview on Tennessee staff.
Yeah.
I loved when it was his turn to have a press conference because he was so honest. He was probably more honest than they wanted him to be at times. Like, I'll never forget, I can't remember who it was now. It was a tight end. And he straight up said, people were asking him, "What do you think about the depth?" And he goes, "Well, this guy's going to redshirt. He's just not ready to play yet." I mean, he was just very honest. And, people were thinking this guy might be, a productive freshman. He's like, "No, he's going to redshirt. He's just not ready." I love his honesty. And so I'm excited for him. I hope he does really well. I mean, I think he will, especially getting that quarterback in. We know how vitally important a quarterback is in this system. So I think that's a great question. Some other comments that came in, we're talking about how are they going to decide between a tiebreaker with no divisions. Mr. Jones said fight to the death. Dwight Schrute would be proud of that comment. Mm-hmm. He would be proud of that. Kevin Carr said, we also have fake UT in Oklahoma coming in, so that's extra games played. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there'll be 2 more teams in the mix next year. But, okay, so here's an interesting scenario. What if – let me throw one out here. Now, this wouldn't happen next year because there is no one – I don't think there's anybody who plays Oklahoma, Texas, and Tennessee. I don't think that's possible because they said that every team is going to play either Oklahoma or Texas. And so, but let's say, 2025 rolls around and let's say that there's a team, let's say Alabama has all 3 teams on their schedule. And let's say Georgia has all 3 teams on their schedule. Let's say that, man, this would be a nightmare scenario for the SEC. That they won't do this because they won't have that many good teams against those teams. But let's say that Alabama beats all of them except Georgia. And let's say that Tennessee loses to just Alabama. And Oklahoma, so then you've got Alabama, and then you've got Texas, Oklahoma, and Tennessee, none of them played each other, but they all played a common opponent in Alabama, and Alabama beats all three of them, but none of them played each other. So now you're looking at other common, because you can't use head to head. So you're looking at other common opponents. It could just be a nightmare scenario for trying to figure out. Like they're going to have very, very clear um, secondary and third and fourth and fifth scenario rules of, if head to head doesn't work, then we move on to common opponents. If that doesn't work, then we move on to some other criteria. If that doesn't work, then we move on to some other. There's going to have to be like at least 4 or 5, because if you have all three of those teams, Texas, Tennessee, and Oklahoma, sitting there and head to head doesn't work, common opponent didn't work because Alabama beat all three of them, then what's that next thing? That next thing, the third criteria might eliminate one of them, but now you're still down to 2. So then there has to be at least a fourth thing that allows them to eliminate potentially another one. But if they're still tied after that, I mean, they're going to have no joke, like 5 criteria that can determine, and they better get all that spelled out in the SEC coaches days, media days, meetings next spring. They have to have all that settled by next spring before the season starts and before SEC media days. So what is that, in May, April or May, when they have the SEC coaches meetings?
Yeah.
So they're going to have all that squared away then, because it's going to be a mess if they don't have like very clearly defined rules that everybody has agreed upon. It's just going to be a mess. And you got to think that if one of them is point differential, then Tennessee is definitely going to be in favor of that. And other teams will try to fight against that because they don't want point differential, because they know that's going to favor Tennessee. So it'll be really, really intriguing. Mr. Jones said 4-team SEC tournament. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, yeah, it will. It'll just be the final 4 of the 12-team tournament.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. That's exactly right. The national playoff. Kevin says it's going to be interesting. Absolutely. It's going to be that next year, the SEC coaches meetings next spring. Those are going to be vitally important meetings, because they got to get this stuff nailed down. You may even hear like by this July, but maybe before this year's SEC media days, they might already be talking about. So here's going to be the scenario next year, because they got to have it very clearly defined. Otherwise, there's going to be people up in arms every single season. I mean, let's be honest. There's going to be people up in arms anyway. Like, why is this happening? What, we were tied? Because, well, they got to have some seriously well-defined rules. And we're not just talking about just to see who gets to SEC championship game. There could be a situation. We're not going to, there will be, I'm assuming there will now be a regular season champion now, starting next year when the divisions are gone, because there won't be any divisions. So there could be a regular season champion. So I would assume in 2024, we're going to see that from the get-go. I mean, we see that in every other sport. We see that in basketball. We see that in baseball. There'll be a regular season champion for football too.
Yep.
Well, that was fun. You got anything else to add before we sign off of here?
No, excited to get to a month from now. We're about 7 weeks away. Can't wait.
Absolutely. Mr. Jones said, I can hear Saban boohooing now about potentially getting snubbed out of the SEC championship game. Kevin said, one last question. Do y'all think Mike Matthews is a lock for UT? And if so, does that start a domino effect? So I'm always a little more hesitant when it comes to high school seniors picking colleges. I don't know, man. It's just, it looks like if I had to bet on it right now, I'd say, yeah, he's going to be at Tennessee. But who knows? I mean, like, somebody could come along and offer him $8 million in NIL deal money or something like that. And he's like, oh, actually, I'm going to go over here. I mean, who knows? I hope I hope they get all three of the guys. I hope they get They got Staley. I hope they get Mike Matthews. I hope they get Jefferson. I think they're getting Jefferson. I think that's pretty much a lock. But Mike Matthews, I mean, he's the one that's kind of. I hope they get him. I'll put it that way. If he does come, then yeah. Wow, if you're a high school senior, you talk about a domino effect. If you're a high school senior, you're looking at this thinking, okay, wait a minute. They got Nico, then Merklinger, then one of the
Probably
top three
George.
quarterbacks.
Yeah, probably
Yeah,
George McIntyre.
yeah, or Deuce Knight, one of the two of them. And you're like, so those guys will be throwing me the ball in a system that just made a guy the Bolitnikoff winner, and he wasn't even supposed to be the primary target on the receiving core through that the whole year. I mean, like you're sitting there looking at it, you're thinking, yeah, I could do a lot of damage in that offense, and I can make a lot of money in the NFL if I go there. I mean, why would you not want to? And then, if you're sitting there as a defensive player, you're like, man, we're going to be scoring on everybody. Yeah, I want to play there. I want to go and win a national championship. Absolutely. He could definitely start a domino effect.
I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Matthews has already committed and they're just scripting out the timeline.
Yeah, that's a very good possibility. Mr. Jones says Vols are going to have one of the top classes. I agree. He said Vols are good at comebacks on Clemson. We may flip Sammy Brown last minute, comeback win down to the last strike. He seems pretty solid, but I mean, who knows? Like I said, he's a kid. 18-year-old kids can change their mind.
I think that ship has sailed. We're pursuing. We finally have a Navy Schuler mentioned.
That's right.
I think the ship on Sammy Brown has sailed. We've been actively pursuing a couple of other linebackers really hard. Elijah Rushing, Jordan Ross. Those are guys that I think they feel very strongly they can get. And
they're all about that rushing kid.
Yeah, and they're both exceptional players. So I think they've given up on Sammy Brown.
Well, that was a fun show. I think this might have been the longest Vol Bros episode in the history of our show. 51st episode, man. And it was a one for the ages. I love it. We'll break up all this stuff over the next several days and, split it up. Boo Carter's a massive pickup. Totally agree. 100%. Absolutely. I think that would be the best touchdown celebration ever if Squirrel buries some acorns in the end zones and then goes and digs them up when he scores a touchdown. That would be epic. Would probably only happen once. And then after, Heupel removes him from the game, you probably wouldn't do it again.
The Neal and Grounds crew would have an issue with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we really enjoyed this. We'll break it up and have, each team's breakdown that we did in its own little video, and we'll do that over the next several weeks and stuff. So fun times, man. It's been a blast. We hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful rest of your evening. And as always, go Vols. And we will see everybody very soon on our next episode. Have a great evening, everybody.